Ladies and gentlemen, Jordan Addison will be joining USC. They were always the favorite to land him after their rumored $3 million plus a house offer came out into the public. I had said I don't see anyone beating USC for Jordan Addison. Now, Jordan Addison did what any good businessman would do. He looked at all of his options. He visited Alabama. He visited Texas. I'm guessing Texas probably was the only team willing to offer Addison something similar to what USC had offered Addison. At least it's all rumored. But the offer again from USC, when it had originally broke that he was entering the transfer portal, and Pittsburgh coaches had thought part of the reason he was entering the portal was because USC boosters had tampered with him. The original offer was reported $3 million, and you just gotta wonder with a guy like Jordan Addison, who was coming off an amazing season, voted the best receiver of college football, 1,600 yards, whatever it was, gonna be a very likely first-round pick this year. You've got to wonder if transferring was even a thought that came into his head without these potential booster tampering situations that have been going on. A USC booster might have just came up to Jordan Addison via social media one day while Jordan Addison was minding his business, ready to go back to Pittsburgh for his junior season, and said, listen, I'll give you $3 million. Come here. Look at what we're building. We've got an amazing offense with Lincoln Riley. And again, I'll give you $3 million. We'll give you a beachfront house. You'll be out here in California. It's a lot nicer than Pennsylvania. You just got to wonder, how bad is the tampering? And this is really the major problem with the transfer portal and with allowing these kids to transfer with immediate eligibility. And again, there really isn't I've thought about this. There's really not a proper workaround for something like this outside of the NCAA being more strict with how they handle tampering and, investigating situations like this. I would love to see the NCAA investigate USC and their boosters' possible involvement of Jordan Addison, because again, I'm thinking that Jordan Addison might not even have, even thought about transferring until USC boosters put the, idea in his head. And they're like, listen, with this immediate eligibility, look at what we're building. We've got Lincoln Riley. We can get you a lot of money. Come here, get guaranteed money, be in a better offense. Maybe Jordan Addison was going to do it anyways, but there were just no rumors at all that Jordan Addison, who had such an unbelievable year at Pittsburgh, projected to be a first-round pick in 2023. There were no rumors, and then suddenly out of the blue, everyone's saying he's entering the transfer portal. Everyone's saying USC gave him a $3 million offer. Everyone's saying USC is the favorite. He did, again, what any good business person would do. He looked at all of his options. He wanted teams to bid against each other. Texas, Alabama, he visits those places. But I've been saying from the beginning, when this first broke, if that rumored $3 million offer by USC is legit, I see it, very hard. It's a very hard proposition. A team's going to top that USC offer due to the fact that Jordan Addison is basically a one and done. So you're giving Jordan Addison $3 million to come to your campus and play one single season before he goes off to the NFL. Unlike many of these five-star recruits, the universities will get them for at least 3 seasons. You're thinking their freshman, sophomore, and junior year. So Addison to Pittsburgh, we really, it's not a fun situation. It really isn't. It's one of the casualties of the transfer portal that unfortunately no one really thought about. We all thought about giving the players more power, which is a great thing, and I think the transfer portal is just something. You're going to instill the transfer windows, which will clean it up a little bit, but this is just something that's going to be happening, unfortunately. When you've got coaches like Brian Kelly completely just leaving their schools with 5 years remaining on their contracts, completely leaving the kids in the dark, it would be hypocritical of me to say these kids shouldn't have immediate eligibility. You have to let it happen. The only thing you can really do to try and clean this up is to create the transfer portal windows, which is what they've been talking about, where it's 2 different windows. Kids are only permitted to enter the transfer portal at 2 different windows. It would clean up the portal, but it wouldn't stop situations like this from happening. You really want to try and nip this stuff in the butt. And I would love to see an investigation onto the way USC recruited this kid, because I'm not so sure this kid was even thinking about transferring before maybe a USC booster came to him and said, put the idea into his head, so... and I think that leads to the question, how good does this make USC? And at this point, with what they've added in the transfer portal, you've got an offensive mind like Lincoln Riley. This is a team that's going to contend for the Pac-12 championship this year, in my opinion. You've got Utah there, you've got Oregon, but neither one of those teams are really ultra elite. So Jordan Addison plus Caleb Williams plus whatever else they brought in, they basically got like 15 transfers or something crazy like that through the portal. They are going to have a good offense. It'll just depend on how good their offensive line is. At least that's what I think. But yeah, that is a team that is very likely going to be preseason top 15 at this point. With the addition of even just Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison, you're adding one of the great young quarterbacks going into his second year, and you're adding a top 3 receiver in college football. So that'll be very interesting to see how good they can be during Lincoln Riley's first year. And then they've got such an amazing recruiting class. Lincoln Riley basically taking the great recruiting class he had in 2023 at Oklahoma and transferring it to USC with Malachi Nelson, the superstar 5-star quarterback, the number 2 overall player who was originally committed to Oklahoma. Lincoln Riley goes to USC. He takes Malachi Nelson with him. They've also got a 5-star receiver, one of the top receivers in the nation, and then a 5-star athlete USC does. So that the overall offensive talent that Lincoln Riley is going to be able to gather being in the state of California at a powerhouse like USC, even with USC being down the past decade or however long they've been down, Lincoln Riley's going to gather so much elite offensive skill position talent being located in California and selling all the NIL opportunities they have that come along with living in LA. It is crazy, and you could see USC running the Pac-12 for at least the next 5 or 6 years. The interesting thing with Lincoln Riley, if he does eventually completely rebuild USC and say in 3 or 4 years he wins a national title, would he consider moving on to the NFL? When you're talking about college coaches looking at the NFL, the 2 that come to mind for me are Ryan Day and Lincoln Riley. They're both young, they're both offensive minds, they're both QB gurus, they both recruit elite top quarterbacks extremely successfully. You've got the number 1 quarterback in 2023 committed to Lincoln Riley, and then the number 1 quarterback in 2024 committed to Ryan Day. If either one of those guys win a national title, would they say, listen, I could always come back to college football, but I want to try the NFL? An NFL team, a GM would hire them 100%. With how young they are, how innovative they are. Those are the type of guys I would look to possibly jump to the NFL if either of them end up winning national titles. Going back to this whole Nick Saban, Jimbo Fisher thing that happened yesterday. Last night, Nick Saban offered an apology for comments on Texas A&M, Jimbo Fisher, Deion Sanders, and Jackson State. Basically, I'll read this off and then I'll tell you why I think Saban did this. He says, first of all, I should have never really singled anyone out. That was a mistake. I really apologize for that part of it. But I am not against name, image, likeness. I think that's great for the players. I think it's the issue is in college athletics in general is the whole system of collectives and people raising money to basically pay players. And the main reason I think Saban did this was because you can already imagine the Texas A&M boosters getting a hold of those Nick Saban comments and completely twisting them to recruits. It's the exact same thing Jimbo Fisher did, where it's like, You see this? Nick Saban doesn't think you deserve $1 million. Nick Saban doesn't think you should get paid. That's not what's happening at all. There's some sort of... Now, obviously, there's not a disconnect between Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban. Jimbo Fisher knows what Nick Saban was saying. He was just twisting it to try and manipulate the general population. But there's a disconnect between casual college football fans and understanding how NIL works and how certain programs bend rules more than others. There's a disconnect. When someone says everyone cheats, everyone pays players, it's like you just do not understand how NIL recruiting in specific works. Because the things that Texas A&M is doing, Alabama is not doing them. Ohio State is not doing them. Clemson is not doing them. That's not me just being a fanboy of Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State. That's the reality. It's hard for the average fan to understand that people say everyone is paying players. It is not that simple. It's just simply not that simple. And, the way Texas A&M operates is kind of a pay to come to the school type process where they are paying kids to come to their school. They're not paying kids when the kids get on campus and then they can do their NIL deals. They are paying kids in specific to come to their school. And Nick Saban is apologizing because his people probably said, listen, they are going to twist this to recruits and basically make it seem like you are against kids getting paid because that's how Jimbo twisted it. That's the exact same thing. It's like Jimbo Fisher coming out and saying, how dare you accuse these kids of taking money and stuff, and they're 17 and 18-year-olds. It's like kids can get paid whatever. Nobody cares about that. We care about actually protecting kids because we don't want kids to make decisions based off of a current monetary gain. And that's exactly what we saw in 2022 when you've got kids going to school for the NIL deal that they're receiving, not for the possible development they could be receiving when it comes to being developed for the next level, for the NFL and getting that next major contract in 3 or 4 years after you get developed by whatever college you pick. So it's a very complicated issue. Saban comes out and apologizes mainly because he doesn't want this to be interpreted as he's against kids getting paid, because that's exactly how the rival, programs like a Texas A&M, like a Tennessee will swing it. So they told him to come out and apologize, and then singling out Jackson State and Texas A&M. I wouldn't apologize for that because, to be honest with you, those are the two most egregious examples when it comes to 2022. Now, what I will say, it's going to be a lot different for 2023, and especially it's going to heat up this summer with other programs getting extremely aggressive in NIL. There were other programs that were involved in 2022, but I think with 2023, we are going to see it go completely off the rails, not just with Texas A&M, but with Florida, with Miami, with schools like that I'm already seeing them put it into place right now. These programs are going to go crazy. This recruiting cycle is going to be crazy with NLI. There's no there are guidelines, but there's no rules. That's the problem. When you have guidelines without rules, you just can cheat and get around it. You need specific rules. You need a specific board to govern this stuff. They don't have that right now. So they're just going to cheat even more. And I think the thing that Nick Saban was also trying to say when he's like, I shouldn't have singled them out, it's because so many other schools are starting to do it. It's not just Texas A&M. It's not just Jackson State, but Saban coming out and singling out Texas A&M. To me, Texas A&M, they're the whooping boy. They're the poster child for this. They are the program. If I'm the NCAA, I would say to all the other programs, I would say to Tennessee, to Florida, to whatever program wants to do what Texas A&M did in 2022, this is what's going to happen to you. And that's why I would make an example out of Texas A&M and I would bowl ban them. And then I know Texas A&M fans would be like, that's not fair. You can't do that. Thoughts and prayers. We got to make an example out of someone. I would make an example out of Texas A&M. They egregiously cheated in 2022. No, they weren't the only one, but they are. And the other thing is you have Jimbo Fisher completely lying. Jimbo Fisher is still saying They didn't cheat. Like, and I know it's like, well, do you want him to say they cheated? No, just shut up. You cheated. You are a cheater. Just shut up. Just shut up. Stop saying you didn't cheat. You're digging yourself a bigger hole. You are a liar. Complete liar. That's what I'm saying. It's like, people are like, well, do you want him to admit he cheated? Just be quiet about it. Just be quiet about it. Everyone knows what you did. And that's where I'm glad Saban said what he said about Texas A&M in specific. Single them out and bowl ban them. So when Florida and their NIL collective get all greedy, they can look and see what happened to Texas A&M. When Miami, when Tennessee, when Texas, when whatever program wants to go off the rails when it comes to NIL because they saw Texas A&M in 2022 sign the greatest recruiting class in history, you can look at Texas A&M and say, if you get caught, the NCAA has a board of NIL, has an authority board on NIL in specific. If they catch you when they investigate those recruitments, you will be bowl banned and you will face, well, I guess you can't face a scholarship reduction because they're talking about eliminating scholarship limits. What a mess this is, guys. But the big stuff, Jordan Addison to USC, they are going to be a very impressive offense. You know, Caleb Williams, it'll be interesting to see how he develops into his second year. Overall, it's horrible for college football, and I would love to see an investigation done because I really doubt. Let me just go ahead and say this. I doubt Jordan Addison was even thinking of transferring before some USC booster hit him up in the DM or however they contact kids these days, whatever. And he's like, listen, I know you're having a great career at Pittsburgh. Nothing against Pittsburgh, but you want to make $3 million. You want to live in California. You want better NIL opportunities. You want to be more famous. This is all a business with NIL. It's all a business. That's why smaller schools will continue to get screwed. There are far more opportunities at Ohio State. There are far more opportunities at Michigan. There are far more opportunities at USC, Georgia, Alabama than there are at Pittsburgh. And that is a major issue. When it comes to the transfer portal, when it comes to NIL, that's why people talk about parity being destroyed by NIL. That's why. Because you have situations like this where every smart businessman will tell Jordan Addison, transfer to USC. Every one of them. It's better for Jordan Addison's career to transfer to USC. That's the big issue with NIL. The big issue. And you could say, well, in general, it's better because it's better for Jordan Addison and stuff. But in terms of the health of college football, having smaller programs be basically talent feeders to bigger programs is not good for your sport at all. Not good for your sport at all. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.